Imagine you've just invested in a fleet of cutting-edge, state-of-the-art, high-speed bullet trains.
Right, the absolute best technology available.
Exactly. They are parked up north, ready to revolutionize travel. You power them up, the engines hum, everything is perfect. But then you look at the tracks heading south to the major cities.
Let me guess. It's a single, aging line of track.
Yeah, a rusty old single line. If you send all those beautiful new trains down that track at once, the friction and weight will literally warp the steel.
Ouch. So you're stuck.
Completely. To prevent a catastrophic derailment, the network operator frantically calls the train companies and pays them with your money, by the way, to keep those multi-million-dollar trains locked in the station.
And meanwhile, to get people to work down south, they hire fleets of old diesel-chugging buses.
Yep. You're left with an incredibly expensive fleet of trains going nowhere.
And a massive bill for the diesel buses you supposedly replaced. I mean, it perfectly captures the absurdity of a system that focuses entirely on the shiny new vehicles, while completely ignoring the infrastructure they need to actually move.
Which brings us to a mind-bending contradiction. What if achieving our grand green energy dreams actually meant paying wind farms, literally handing them cash not to produce power, while simultaneously burning gas to keep the lights on?
It sounds totally counterintuitive.
It does. Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a fascinating source document titled Grid First, a practical roadmap for clean energy infrastructure.
It's a really sharp piece of writing.
It really is. The central argument here is that the clean energy transition isn't failing because the wind turbines or solar panels are bad. It's struggling because the physical wires connecting them are just hopelessly inadequate.
Right, and the author makes this vital distinction early on between a destination and a route map.
Oh, that's a great way to frame it.
Yeah, because net zero, energy independence, ending poverty, these are universally appealing destinations. But, as the source notes, a destination is not a route map.
You can't just mandate it into existence.
Exactly. You cannot power a country by issuing a press release.
Yeah.
And you certainly can't balance a volatile electrical grid with just good intentions. The engineering reality has to be there.
And just to be clear with you, the listener, our goal in this deep dive isn't to take a political side on net zero.
No, not at all.
We're simply impartially exploring the source's central engineering and economic argument, which is that policy has essentially ignored physical reality. So let's move from these abstract targets to the gritty reality of physics.
Because electricity isn't magic. It needs physical corridors to travel.
Exactly. Think of it like building a massive state-of-the-art water reservoir in the north, that's Scotland's wind farms.
Right.
But then you only install, like, a garden hose to carry all that water down to the thirsty cities in the south, in England.
The geographic reality here is really the crux of the issue. The document highlights a very specific geographic bottleneck in Great Britain.
Where exactly is this happening?
So Scotland generates massive amounts of wind power. I mean, the geography and weather are perfect for it, and the investment up there has been staggering.
That's our fleet of bullet trains, a huge reserve of clean generation sitting up north.
But electricity generation is totally useless if it can't reach the demand centers. And the vast majority of the demand is in the south.
In the densely populated cities and industrial hubs of England.
Exactly. So to get there, that massive flow of Scottish wind energy hits a geographical wall. The National Energy System Operator, or NESO, calls it the B6 boundary.
The B6 boundary. Let's break down what that actually is.
Basically, it's the physical transmission border. It separates the network run by SP Transmission in southern Scotland from the network run by National Grid Transmission in England.
Okay, so it's a literal border of wires and towers.
Yes, it consists of specific high-voltage lines and substations, and there simply is not enough physical capacity.
The garden hose.
Exactly. The copper wires aren't thick enough. The substations aren't robust enough to move all that wind power across the border when it's blowing hard.
Okay, so what happens mechanically in that moment? Let's say it's a blustery Tuesday. The Scottish turbines are spinning at maximum capacity, pushing gigawatts of power toward that B6 boundary.
Right.
The grid operators are sitting there watching their screens. What are they physically worried about happening to those wires?
Well, they are terrified of thermal limits and frequency collapse.
Thermal limits, meaning heat.
Yeah. An electrical grid isn't a storage tank. It's a real-time matching engine. Supply must perfectly match demand every single second to maintain the grid's heartbeat.
Which in the UK is 50 hertz, right?
Exactly. And if you try to push more power through a transmission line than it's rated for, the physical resistance in the copper generates intense heat.
Wow.
The wires literally heat up, they expand, and they can sag into trees, which causes a short circuit.
Or they trigger massive safety breakers to prevent the wires from melting entirely.
Right, which would cause a cascading blackout. So to prevent the lines from melting, the system operator has to intervene.
And how do they do that?
They run something called a local constraint market. When the sensors show the B6 boundary is maxing out, the operator steps into this market and essentially buys off the generators.
They pay them to stop.
Yeah, they tell those wind farms in Scotland to feather their blades and just stop generating.
Curtailment.
Curtailment. The power is there, the wind is totally free, but they are forced to turn it off just to save the wires.
What's fascinating here is that the electricity system cares only about voltage, frequency, and physical limits. Physics always gets a vote.
Always.
A government can pass a law mandating 100% clean energy by 2030, but if the electrons cannot physically fit through the B6 boundary well, the legislation is basically meaningless.
The grid operates on the laws of thermodynamics, not the laws passed in Parliament.
Yeah.
And when those two realities collide, the fallout isn't just, a technical glitch.
It triggers a massive economic chain reaction.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting. And frankly, a bit painful if you're the one paying the utility bills. Let's ask the critical so what question.
Right. How does this affect you?
How does this bottleneck impact your wallet? The source cites some shocking data from Moto Energy. They're an analytics firm tracking these grid constraints.
And the numbers are huge.
They really are. In the year 2025 alone, Britain's wind curtailment bill hit £1.35 billion.
1.35 billion. And that is money added directly to consumer energy bills.
It's not paid by some abstract government fund.
No, you pay for it.
Just to unpack the sheer absurdity of that figure, you are paying wind farms not to generate power.
Because of the bottleneck.
Right. And then, because the people down in London or Manchester still need to run their hospitals and boil their kettles, the grid operator has to find power south of that bottleneck instantly.
So they fire up generation that is physically located closer to the demand.
And very frequently, because you need it spun up on incredibly short notice to replace the curtailed wind, that generation is a gas-fired power plant.
Exactly. So you are turning around and paying gas plants extra money to turn on at the last minute to fill the gap.
You are essentially paying twice for the exact same megawatt of electricity. And the electricity you finally get is generated by fossil fuels anyway.
The author of the document frames this as the worst possible version of green policy. It touches on a massive theme in this text, which is the psychology of public consent.
Public consent. Why does that matter so much for the grid?
Well, achieving a transition to clean energy requires the public to buy in. You're asking them to accept new infrastructure, make lifestyle changes, and often pay higher bills in the short term.
Right. It's a big ask.
It is. And that consent is entirely reliant on visible competence. People need to feel like the architects of the system actually know what they're doing.
So if you ask voters to make sacrifices for the climate, but they watch a system actively wasting £1.35 billion a year to turn off clean energy and burn gas instead.
The policy becomes politically toxic. It destroys trust. The document points out that every single time a curtailment payment is made, it arms skeptics with undeniable proof of failure.
The phrase from the text that really stuck with me is that this approach starts looking less like environmental responsibility and more like elite self-indulgence.
It's a brutal phrase, but accurate.
It paints a picture of policymakers so enamored with the grand vision of net zero that they couldn't be bothered to consult an engineer on how to actually plug it all in.
Because the public understands waste. They might not know the technical specifications of a high-voltage direct current line.
Or where the B6 boundary is.
Right, but they understand being charged billions of pounds for a system that is actively working against its own stated goals.
It's incredibly frustrating.
And the danger isn't just that skeptics might undermine the transition. It's that the transition is undermining itself through remarkably poor execution.
Now, hold on though. I have to play devil's advocate and push back a bit on this narrative that the grid is just being completely ignored.
Okay, let's hear it.
If this bottleneck is costing over £1 billion a year, surely the operators are trying to fix it. And the source itself outlines some massive infrastructure projects currently underway.
That's true. There are huge projects happening.
Right. For example, SP Energy Networks has a 5-year, £12 billion rewiring program for central and southern Scotland. It runs from 2026 to 2031.
It's a massive undertaking.
They are building 12 new major substations and upgrading over 570 kilometers of transmission lines.
And they're also building the Eastern Green Link 1, or EGL1.
What's that?
It's a massive subsea cable running from Scotland down the coast to England to basically bypass that land border entirely. Ofgem approved a funding allowance of about £2 billion for that single project.
Okay, so if they are dropping £14 billion on brand new substations, thousands of kilometers of wires, and massive subsea cables right now, doesn't that massive price tag prove the government and operators are actually taking the physical grid seriously?
Well, it proves they are taking it seriously now in a state of absolute emergency.
Oh, I see.
The document argues that the sheer scale and sudden urgency of these mega projects actually validates its critique. The issue isn't whether the wires will eventually be built. The issue is the order of operations.
We built the bullet trains before we laid the tracks.
Exactly. The generation was subsidized and built years before the transmission capacity was ever approved.
So we did it backwards.
Completely backwards. If a £12 billion emergency upgrade is required immediately just to stop the system from hemorrhaging curtailment payments, it demonstrates that transmission was treated as an afterthought.
They incentivized the wind farms to hit their generation targets and left the grid operators scrambling to catch up.
The text has a striking analogy for this. It compares the current political approach to net zero to someone shouting arrive faster at a broken-down bus.
That is brilliant, just yelling at the bus.
You can yell all you want. You can legislate that the bus must arrive by 2030. But until you physically rebuild the engine, the bus isn't moving. Shoving more wind turbines onto a constrained grid doesn't equal better policy. It just equals more curtailment, higher balancing costs, and more frustrated citizens.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the illness. It's a big one. But what does this all mean for the cure?
Well, the source doesn't just complain, thankfully.
Right, it provides a roadmap. It essentially calls for an end to treating net zero like a sacred timetable and instead treating it like the heavy civil engineering challenge it actually is.
And this roadmap centers on a concept that should be obvious but hasn't been. Grid first.
Grid first.
Priority number one. You cannot approve or subsidize new generation unless the transmission capacity to move that power is either already in place or being built simultaneously.
Priority 2 ties into that, right?
Yes, delivering the identified transmission projects.
Yeah.
Those major reinforcements, like the Scotland-England subsea links, have to be accelerated ahead of new generation.
Priority 3 is where it gets into some really cool tech, intelligent storage. Because if we can't build wires fast enough, what do we do with the excess power? But the document is very specific about what kind of storage. It isn't just talking about putting batteries everywhere to hit a quota.
No, it emphasizes storage that genuinely reduces curtailment. If the B6 boundary is the choke point, you need massive utility-scale battery installations or pumped hydro facilities located specifically in Scotland, just north of that boundary.
Right at the bottleneck.
Exactly. When the lines are full, instead of paying the wind farms to turn off, you dump that excess gigawatt of power into the batteries.
And then?
Then when the wind drops and the lines free up, you discharge the batteries southward. It acts as a shock absorber for the grid.
That makes perfect logistical sense. But there's another part of this roadmap priority number 4 that really caught me off guard.
I think I know which one you mean.
For a document focused on a practical roadmap for clean energy, it firmly defends keeping gas generation online. Why is a clean energy roadmap advocating for fossil fuel backups?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of grid stability, gas is currently an unavoidable engineering reality.
It feels like a step backward, though.
It might feel that way, but the document makes a sharp point. Gas shouldn't be viewed purely through a lens of moral failure. Right now, it is the most reliable form of dispatchable generation we have.
And when you say dispatchable, you mean power that we can command to turn on instantly.
Right, unlike wind, which is entirely at the mercy of the weather. The grid operators need a tool they can control.
Until we have something better.
Exactly. Until we have built enough of those strategic battery installations, expanded nuclear power, or established enough subsea interconnectors to other countries to carry the burden safely, gas is the safety net.
Because the system has to cope with a freezing, perfectly still week in January just as flawlessly as a windy day in April.
Precisely. If you eliminate your gas backup before your clean infrastructure is fully built and tested, you are gambling with the stability of the entire grid.
And if you lose that gamble, if the lights go out during a winter freeze, The public backlash will instantly derail the entire green transition.
Exactly. The ambition might be zero gas, but the reality is that energy security has to come first. Otherwise, you lose the political mandate to build anything at all.
Which flows directly into priority number 5, maybe the most surprising element of this entire energy document.
The flood defenses.
Yeah. It argues that a core priority for clean energy policy must be funding flood defenses and climate resilience, drainage, river management, coastal protection. Why is immediate flood defense featured in a roadmap about electricity transmission?
Because the author understands that policy exists in the real world, and it's subject to human psychology.
What do you mean?
People evaluate a government's competence based on whether it protects them right now. Imagine a family standing in their flooded living room.
Okay.
They do not care about a politician's speech regarding a 2045 emissions target. They want the water out of their house today.
That makes a lot of sense. If a government proves it can't even manage the drainage in a local river to protect a community today, why on earth would that community trust that same government to flawlessly re-engineer the entire global energy economy for tomorrow?
Right. Competence in the present buys the political capital needed for the future. The heart of this entire roadmap is that cleaner energy requires practical, unglamorous delivery, not moral theater.
Basic competence. That really is the core message here. To save the clean energy transition, we have to save it from terrible delivery.
You have to prioritize energy security, affordable bills, physical resilience against weather, and public trust.
As the source brilliantly puts it, we need green energy without green insanity. We do not have to choose between lowering emissions and utilizing common sense, but we do have to build the physical wires, reinforce the aging substations, secure the gas backups, and protect our households before we issue another grand slogan or set another arbitrary deadline.
This raises an important question, though. It challenges us to completely redefine environmental responsibility.
How so?
It isn't just about demanding cleaner generation anymore. True responsibility means honoring the severe engineering reality required to actually deliver that power. Adding thousands of wind turbines to a grid that cannot physically carry their electricity isn't progress. It's a £1.35 billion monument to poor planning.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to ponder. The source makes it painfully clear that in the realm of electricity, physics always gets the final vote. You cannot negotiate with the thermal limits of a copper wire.
You really can't.
But consider how this blind spot applies to other massive technological shifts we are facing right now. The rush to adopt without building the foundation.
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Think about the staggering energy demands of massive new data centers being built for artificial intelligence, or the millions of charging stations needed to sustain a nationwide mandatory fleet of electric vehicles.
Right, those are huge infrastructure challenges.
Exactly. What if, before any CEO or politician was legally allowed to set a visionary public target for EV adoption or AI integration, they were forced to prove they had already built the invisible, boring infrastructure first?
The uprated transformers.
Yes, the reinforced distribution lines. Because right now, in the energy sector, we are staring at a billion-pound bill, desperately shouting at a broken-down bus to arrive faster, while our brand-new bullet trains sit idle in the station, waiting for the tracks to be laid.